Okay, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me here to speak today. It's nice getting out of the UK. We've had rain for the last week and a half, so it's nice to have some sunshine, which I thought it should be the other way around because your country's so green. But so anyway, well, thank you very much. I'll start off just by giving you a bit of background to who I am. My name is James Brown. I'm not going to give any songs for you today, but I'll hopefully tell you all about BIM. My background is civil and structural engineering, so I spent 7 years as a bridge designer, where 3D design and integration was a big part of what I was doing. Spent quite a bit of time doing software development and design as part of that, very small programs. I then left and joined ASDA in about 2006. I spent 6 or 7 years working at ASDA, initially looking at concept development of greenfield sites, how to bring together lots of data and information, desktop information, automate that process, make it as efficient as possible, and then take that all the way through the retail process to planning and then to retail handover. After a number of years, I went through a couple of promotions and then started to look after all of the concept development and the prototyping for ASDA, so it had all of the different disciplines integrated within that. And some of the, ASDA being a very low-cost retailer, one of the objectives we're trying to achieve over the last couple of years was cost reduction. And 20% cost reduction is what we were trying to get out of a very tight design, which we managed to achieve, but we would not have been able to do that without the use of building information modelling. So that was a core and key part of that. I left ASDA in about 2 years ago. I set up a consultancy. At the same time, I also set up the forum, BIM for Retail, which was the first BIM for in the UK. We got David Philp along to our first one, and he liked what we were doing, and he saw that as a bit of a blueprint of how to bring the industry together for different sectors and start to help with collaboration, which I think has been quite a success. So now I run my own consultancy, and I'm with Sainsbury's at the moment. So we spent the last 18 months trying to develop Sainsbury's BIM strategy. Interestingly, they're not part of the BIM for Retail forum for a number of reasons. But that's a bit about me. So I will take you now through a bit about the group. So the who, what, where, why and when. So everybody on the right-hand side is part of BIM for Retail on a regular basis. A lot of different retail clients there, predominantly around food, apart from Next and Specsavers that are obviously high street stores. M&S is a bit of an in-between, B&Q a lot of out-of-town retail parks. We've got the link into government with David Philp and Mark Bew. Rambol engineers, so structure and mechanical electrical, giving us advice on how they're using building information modelling. And then after I left ASDA, I still run the chair, which I think is a good thing. They like the fact that I'm now independent and I can go off and do research and help them develop and move forward. Okay, so sorry about that. Whenever I talk about BIM, I get a lot of questions around what's the definition, and a lot of focus goes on to that definition. What does it mean? And I really try to step away from it and say, well, okay, I've put on there the government's definition in the UK. That's off of the BIM Task Group website. It's a little extract. And yep, technically, absolutely fine with all the content on that. I think people need to try and walk away with a flavour of what BIM is, so they can keep that in their mind when they're trying to make choices and decisions on projects, so that they can always, keep the compass heading north. The image below is something that I pulled together and just stuck it on my website for people to have a look at, and that is really what I'm trying to say is there's a very strong analogy between the benefits that smart technology, iPhones, tablets have brought to the communications industry compared to how BIM will change the construction industry. So if you go back maybe 10 years and you look at all of the applications that used to be out there and different uses of data management from cameras, phones, games, emails, the internet, sat-navs, they were all independent devices that people used to use on their own. Along come smartphones, tablets, and the cloud, and it brings all of that data and that information into one place, and it allows for a much more efficient communication of information. And for me, that's what BIM is about. It's communicating information through the life of a project as efficiently as you can do. That's a very, very strong principle I believe in. So when I go through some of the bits later on, I need to try and keep that in mind. Okay, so one of the things that we try and do with a new client, a new retail client, is try and explain the differences that you'll see on a BIM project compared to a traditional project. So rather than defining BIM, what are you going to see that's different? The first thing is the platform is going to change. So this is kind of the equivalent of you choosing the old Nokia push-button phone versus a tablet. So you need to make the transition to a platform that is going to facilitate the use of BIM. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be Autodesk Revit, but it's a very common platform. So you need to make that transition. The next difference that you're going to see is a substantial amount of coordination and collaboration that you wouldn't necessarily see on a traditional 2D project. So rather than having consultants working one after the other, so an architect coming on, handing over to a structural engineer, then passing the data on to mechanical, electrical, we're expecting to see consultants working a lot sooner in that process. Okay, so there are plenty of graphs that show curves of where information exists within a project and then having that shifted earlier in the process. That's exactly what that's about. So bringing designers on board earlier. The first few pilots I ever ran when I was at ASDA, became very, very clear that mechanical, electrical, and refrigeration were being brought into the process so early that they were asking questions about, well, we don't have this, so-and-so hasn't made a decision, or we've not had approval for this. And what that is identified, or is identifying, is the fact that you're forcing the business to start to make choices and decisions a lot earlier than they're used to making, and it allows you to then come up with a much more optimal design that you're not going to change later down the line. So collaboration is a key part of it. The third one, a bit of an American term, but interoperability of data, which is all about compatibility of file types and information that you share. Absolutely crucial that we get this right for BIM to work. So as an analogy, if somebody sends you a 10,000 word PDF report and says, I've marked up some changes for you, can you make those changes? You're going to have a job to actually get that information back, because you have to copy it, you have to paste it, there'll be errors, it'll take time to do that, and it'll introduce an enormous amount of waste. Whereas if you send the original file type over to somebody and say, can I make those changes, or can you make those changes for me, it's going to be very, very quick. That principle needs to be applied to BIM. If you're sharing data with people, you need to share it in a format that is usable by those individuals to save them time, to stop them making errors, and to save cash. Because every time information is shared and having to be recreated, it's costing somebody money to do that. And the fourth difference is applications. So as with smartphones, if the base technology doesn't do something, there's a damn good chance that somebody has created an application, a third-party user application that will do that for you. I believe we should support that on the condition that it works with the other three. Absolutely fine with that. People will innovate and come up with ideas a lot faster than companies like Autodesk, and that's why Autodesk end up bringing those other organizations under their umbrella, because they're innovating. All of that then needs to be underpinned by your supporting documentation, whether that's BIM execution plans, your standards, contract documents, template files, libraries, or your office protocols, your maturity assessments, and then if you're employing other consultants, you need to make sure that their scopes of service have BIM deliverables written into them. So 4 key differences, and your supporting documentation are the differences that you're seeing on a live project. And as long as you're applying that over the plan, the design, the construct, and the operate phases, then I think that's what BIM really should be. Okay, so just a quick look at the retailers and how they differ by sector. I'll give you this presentation so you can share it. You don't need to make so many notes. But generally speaking, as to the first one on the list, although they say that they do a lot of new extension, developer shells and fit outs, it is predominantly the new stores. Waitrose, John Lewis, very much around fit out of shells on the high street. So the use of scanning technology is quite high for those guys. M&S, I won't say too much because I know chaps from M&S are going to come and give you a more detailed description, so I'll save that one for them. B&Q, very much about out-of-town shopping centres. They're going through a process at the moment of what they're calling right fits, which is making sure that the space is still good for them, so they're having to reduce a lot of their store sizes down, so they're going back and reusing a lot of information. Next and Specsavers, predominantly about fit out, but they're not really using it as BIM, it's more around Revit. So they've changed the platform from 2D AutoCAD over to Revit. They're not necessarily linking it into the other disciplines, using the coordination and the clash detection, but they're on that journey. So we pulled together some slides just to put to the government to kind of explain why, the top 3 things, the reasons of why we're using BIM. The first one on the left-hand side is all around what I was just saying about the front loading of information. So it's allowing each client to make choices and decisions a lot earlier in the process to give a more coordinated and informed design. It comes with a caveat, and that is that if you're spending your fees a lot earlier in the process and you have a very high dropout rate, maybe your projects don't progress, then there's potentially quite a lot of waste. So there needs to be an optimization and a balance between how much information you put into the project versus how quickly those projects are then dropping out and maybe not being built. In the middle, supplier efficiency. It's always a contentious one, especially when you talk to architects around fees are you going to cut their fees if they're now doing BIM, or do they get extra fees if they're doing BIM? What we do know is that whenever somebody undertakes a new process, there is a period of time when they become less efficient, or they're learning, going through that learning curve. It takes time to go through that, and the impact of it can be quite substantial. So going back to your enablers in your BIM strategy, if your clients or you as an organisation can put the right documentation and the right processes in place and have the right support, then you can limit the length of time that you're going through that learning curve, and you can limit the impact of it as well. And you will come out the other side more efficient. Project memory loss, really what that goes back to is probably a lot of it is around interoperability of data, but retail clients have a tendency to change project teams. They hand information over between departments. Every time that information is shifted from one person to another, if it's not embedded into a building information model, information gets lost. And that costs somebody money to recreate that. Information goes missing. Could be issues if it's around health and safety and CDM. In the BIM world, what we're looking to do is integrate and coordinate all of that information into one combined model so that you get that continual growth of data and information, which should save us a substantial amount of cash. And then you get to the end of the curve, and we then need to hand it over to FM, which historically, it just drops off the conveyor belt. So we need to make sure that digital handover between construction and FM is working so that we're not losing that information. The piece of work that we've done with Mark Bew and David Philp over the last 12 months, this graph's it will slide across, but it's basically showing each line. I think I've got my pointer. But each line on this chart shows a process for each of the retailers. The ones at the top are ones that are building from feasibility all the way through to retail handover. The ones that are slightly lower down are predominantly fit out. But what we've managed to do is identify key stages, the government calls them data drops, are points in the process where we need to make a full output of the design to make a financial decision. We've managed to identify that regardless of the retailers, we know that we have consistent gateways. So what that's allowing us to do is to map a common process and start to talk about how we can standardise employers' requirements, contract documents across the industry, so that when developers are working on retail projects, they're getting a consistent message and that the deliverables can be more consistent. Just at the bottom there, one of the other things that we're focusing on at the moment might look slightly different to kind of the effort of going into process, but we're looking at family creation and content creation. I think this year is probably the first year that I've started to have suppliers approaching me saying, we've got BIM content on our website now, would you like to use it? Can you use it? And that's a massive step forward. So it moves us out of the world of consultants having to charge a fee for creating generic content and actually having free content provided by a supplier that is actually the content that's going to get built, and it has the information behind that particular product, which is a massive step forward. So we're going through a list of suppliers that is consistent across all of the retailers, and then trying to work with those suppliers to provide us with content which we can then start to build into our databases. Okay, so IT requirements. I just want to talk to you just quickly about some of the things that we think are points that you might want to consider. Levels of detail is quite a contentious topic. Everybody has their views on what information should be in a model, when it should go into a model, how much data should be in there. What this is here is a refrigeration cabinet from a company that provides this cabinet for almost all of the retailers that are on the BIM for Retail forum. Now, to generate that level of detail would take weeks of drafting to create, and you would never really use it. So we're having a discussion saying, well, what can you do as a manufacturer with the information that you've already got? So you generate this level of detail to actually go through the manufacturing process. Why can't we take that data and just automate it and slide it through some kind of data conversion process and then turn it into either an IFC or a Revit file that we can then import straight into the model, and then you don't have to spend any time or effort updating that model. Any changes that you make in the construction process automatically then work their way through into the families. Now, the downside of that is that individual file is about 10 megabytes. Okay, and you have probably maybe, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 of those in a model, and then you've got all the other refrigeration items, then you've got all the other disciplines. So data-wise, that's not workable. But level of detail, I think that's kind of taking us maybe 2 years down the line. If we can get this level of data to work and level of detail to work, you've got individual componentry within that cabinet that you can potentially start to link through into FM. So rather than facilities management entering into their reactive maintenance database when there's a defect saying we've got a problem with a fridge in this store, why can't we componentize that into a three-dimensional model that's sat within the FM system where they can actually go in and click on the item that's not working and then raise the tag against that particular item, and then have that item linked through to a specs and standards website somewhere that tells you who the manufacturer is, it's got the installation documentation, it tells you how to take it apart, it tells you all of the part numbers that are in there. Now, I think we're looking to maybe, I don't know, years into the future, but I think that's the direction we want to be going in. I'm not a great fan of consultants generating generic content. I am a great fan of the person that's going to give you that content, or is going to install that piece of kit, actually giving you it directly and having all the information behind it. It's just some food for thought. Thoughts around creation. I think a lot of people get nervous when they're creating content because they don't know what it's going to get used for. And so they either over-model or they don't create because they're worried that they're going to get it wrong. I think those 5 items on the right-hand side there are the absolute bare minimum that you need to hit. Okay, so retail rendering is quite important because we like stuff to look like what it's going to look like, so that when you do a render of a store and people do the walk around, they're not surprised by what they're seeing. I think that's pretty critical. Getting the items linked in terms of their name and convention into the cost plan. So you allow that automation of the bill of quantities. That's key. The space utilization. Okay, so if you're creating a 3D component and it doesn't physically work on site because you've not put a box on the side that's actually interfering with the wall, then I think that's a fail. The coordination, you need to be able to allow that piece of kit to be coordinated with other disciplines, and then you need to be able to do clash detection. Okay, maybe there's some overlap on some of those, but my advice to our consultants is do those, and if you can do those, stop. Okay, if you're creating anything that's going above and beyond that, you're probably wasting your time. And then do those and see what happens. And then if it gets to the point where somebody then says, well, it's not got enough of this or it's not got enough of that, then we can always go back and add a little bit more in. But don't waste your time creating details and flanges and stuff it's just going to sit there and never get used. Those 5 plus the information, so the text information that goes behind them, is probably the most important data and information that we need. Okay, another principle I'd just like to share with you is around data flow. So we start off typically going through a design construct all the way through to retail handover with all of the different disciplines, and we want to get that information over and share that with our facilities management company so that they can use the data and information that we've captured in that process, so that if they're doing reactive maintenance or planned preventative maintenance, they're working on the information that is real, rather than having to go and find it on a website somewhere, in a box. But we're hitting, I don't know if this is the same everywhere, but we're hitting a data block, or a brick wall in terms of that handover. So at the moment, getting information out of a Revit model into a facilities management website is a very difficult or cumbersome process at the moment. So what happens is that data drops off the conveyor belt into as-built drawings and some extranet somewhere on a system. And then you come back maybe 3-4 years down the line, you want to do an extension or a remodel. Everything that's happened in the FM world over the last 3 or 4 years has not been shared with that database. Okay, so you're out of date the moment you upload it. Okay, so that link is a broken link. So you're then having to go back and do surveys of information that you probably should already have, just to give yourself the comfort that that the information that you're working on is real. Okay, so we need to improve that data handover. Okay, now I know Kobe. I don't know if anybody's going to talk about Kobe today, but is an information exchange between the construction world and the FM world, and it is basically a spreadsheet that is automating that input. Okay, I'm happy to use Kobe, but I'd much rather that the FM companies started to engage with the software developers like Autodesk and say, well, how can we get the information directly out of your model straight into that FM system? Okay, so what I want to be able to do is go all the way through, input the information into FM. If we do an extension or a remodel, to re-update the information within FM, but also when we come to do an extension or a remodel, I want to be able to round-trip that information and update the design models with what has changed in the last 3 or 4 years, which brings an enormous number of questions. And what information do you update? If it's a light bulb, do you change it? Who does it? Is the person that's updating that, have they got the right level of professional indemnity? Does the architect's model no longer become the architect's because somebody's played with it? I don't know. And so all of that information workflow needs to work before we can get the full benefits of a unified system. Okay. So just a few phrases for you. I haven't put any pictures on it. Things for the future I think we need to develop in terms of information technology. So interoperability, I think that whatever you're working on, you need to look at that data flow and make sure that you're sharing information with all of your members of the design team in a format that allows them to use your information and not have to recreate it. The unified system of getting that design, construct and operate working so you can round trip the information is an absolutely crucial part of the long-term strategy, I think, for building information modeling. Autodesk don't seem to want to go into that world. The FM providers that I speak to don't seem at this point in time to be wanting it enough to force the level of change that's required to start to integrate the systems. But I think going from many systems down to one is got to be an aspiration. We need to be able to update facilities management information from a building information model. So if that BIM model changes, we need to be able to get that data back in somehow. So we need to look at the data flows, the file types, the fields, the parameters that need to go over. We need to be able to round trip it back for any changes that have happened over the last whatever period of time. We need to start providing PPM schedules, so planned preventative maintenance schedules. So go back to that refrigeration cabinet. We need that supplier to provide us with a list of parameters and information that tells us how much money we need to spend on what timescale we need to spend it. So is it, I don't know, £100 or 100 euros every week? Is it 100 euros every 6 months? Is it every 2 years? How many man hours go into that? So give you a spend and a man hour profile that you can then combine with all the 200, 300, 400 other assets that are on that project to give you an overall cost and time spend for that project. And then to be able to link that then back to the capital budget for that project and go, well, actually, if we change this item or this item, it might cost us slightly more, but does it give us an improvement in our maintenance cost? And does it allow us to maintain our stores more efficiently? We need to keep the pressure on manufacturers to provide the building information model families. Now, whether that's upskilling those organisations, or whether it's providing a drafting service for them, or whether it's to help them take their existing information and pass that through into a usable format so that people aren't having to recreate the data. Reactive maintenance. So at the moment, I think across the retail board, facilities management companies will go out, react to defects, and they will I don't know, maybe a fridge goes down, somebody will arrive on site to fix it, fine. If they can't fix it, they then have to go and find the information about that piece of kit. It takes hours and hours and hours for people to then go back, research where the information is, go onto different extranet websites to find it. We need a smarter way of linking the asset information through into a database that has user manuals. It tells you, the asset information about warranty information, who the installing contractor was, contact details to get that person back. And in doing that, you'll start to reduce the cost of doing that maintenance. Okay? And I'm not saying that initially everybody's going to reduce their costs, but if you can prove that you can do it across the entire estate by making that information available across the entire estate, then you can start to drive costs down by retendering contracts, by making the information available. There's a lot of work that needs to be put into that to get it to work. There needs to be a change of attitude as well. We need cloud-based design, construct and operate technologies. So things like Autodesk 360 Glue that are making design teams, also making information accessible to both retail clients and to design teams so that you're reducing email traffic. You've got one version of the truth. You're allowing an online system to do all the heavy lifting in terms of the coordination and the clash detection. It means that you're not reliant on massive, high-spec PCs that you're always having to update, because you can access it across the cloud and you can let Autodesk or any other company do most of the lifting for you. But I think cloud-based technology has got to be, it's not necessarily the be-all and end-all, but I think it's got to be a core part of the strategy going forward. Whatever we come up with, I think retail shows me that on an annual basis, the focus on, or priorities on where each retailer is trying to push the boundaries changes. Whether it's cost, whether it's carbon, sustainability, that always generates other databases. So whatever we create in terms of the building information model, we need to have the functionality to link into other databases and have that flexibility to be able to keep shifting. I think this is becoming more important, is workflow control. And although it sounds boring, I think when you go from many systems down to one and you have everybody accessing the same information, the controls around who accesses what information is very, very important. Do you allow your external supply chain to access information? Do you have it all in one place? It's good to have it in one place because you've only got one version of it. It reduces the amount of data that you hold, but then it also gives other people the opportunity to then access that data if you don't want them to. A lot of thought needs to go into the workflow control. So hopefully that's just a bit of I know it's a bit fast and my voice is a bit monotone, so I apologise about that. But that should give you a good feel for what we're doing as BIM for retail. The things that we're trying to focus on at the moment around content creation and standardisation, and some of the areas that we feel probably need to be developed IT-wise to help us move forward. So thank you very much.